I'm not sure if it was always this way, but one constant in the modern world, I think, is this absolute compulsion to externalize blame. The mantra of this century has become, "It's not my fault." And so, in an age where the Greek gods have shuffled off their mortal coils, no longer around to take the rap for failed harvests or a bad hair day, we found ourselves frantically searching for new deities to pin our shortcomings on. Suddenly, we seem to be discovering God in every nook and cranny of life, in every small gesture and hidden pattern, and one of the most worshipped contemporary deities, in this particular sense, has become the Redpill theory. Now, despite everything, I can't help but acknowledge that it's not just real, but it's also a surprisingly accurate, if painfully cynical, description of intersex dynamics. The truly fascinating part of this theory, however, is that if it were actually applied, it could effectively solve every single problem incels face. Applied in what sense, you ask? The answer, disarmingly enough, is simple. Let's imagine, for a moment, that perceived attractiveness A is the critical function determining our romantic success. For the sake of rigorous academic inquiry, let us define our key variables. M stands for money, the universal lubricant of desire. L stands for looks, the visual data packet. S stands for status, the social hierarchy identifier. Thus, in its pristine, unblemished form, A equals a function of M, L, and S variables. For the sake of elegant simplicity, we shall postulate that this function is linear and weighted by sensitivity coefficients. So A equals alpha times M plus beta times L plus gamma times S. Here, alpha, beta, and gamma represent how sensitive the dating market is to each parameter. Naturally, these coefficients are fluid, shifting dynamically with temporal and cultural contextual variances. Observe the exquisite precision. Now, in traditional economics, inflation denotes a generalized increase in prices, typically attributed to an excess of monetary supply relative to demand. Applying this concept to the Redpill framework, if a collective increase occurs in the value of a single variable, for instance L equals looks, that variable is progressively devalued as an attractive parameter. In layman's terms, if physical fitness becomes the social norm, a six-pack is no longer a rare commodity. Therefore, we can confidently introduce the concept of the inflation of L. Inflation of L equals the change in N high L divided by N total, where N high L represents the number of individuals possessing an above-average aesthetic attributes. Ergo, when the inflation of L increases, beta decreases. Conversely, should these inflationary pressures recede, even aesthetically moderate individuals, the mid-tiers, if you will, may surprisingly achieve favorable outcomes. Beauty is a finite and manipulable commodity. Through collective action, a crisis of confidence in the value of L can be manufactured, much like in financial markets through speculation. Doing so is a relatively simple exercise. The parameters alpha, beta, and gamma are context-dependent and therefore manipulable within a given environment. For example, I am moderately attractive, yet in the context of my former workplace, I was perceived as particularly handsome simply because the beta coefficient was low. What can be done? One can organize. If all the unattractive individuals within a given social context were to intentionally make themselves less appealing, it would become possible to push even the least attractive from a 4 to a 6 or even an 8. Furthermore, to each according to their capacity, to each according to their needs, individuals could be selectively promoted in a rotating fashion, almost like a carousel, enabling a highly targeted approach to attraction. You like a classmate? Nothing could be easier. Just mention it to the collective and everyone else deliberately lets themselves go. L is deflated at the group level. Everyone becomes less attractive, collectively, bringing her within your reach. I understand that some may not appreciate collectivism, and for this very reason I can also accommodate you lone wolves. In theoretical terms, given a function A equals alpha M plus beta L plus gamma S, it is possible by determining the values of the variables within the context you are embedded in to calculate the specific values of M, L, and S for which success can be guaranteed. Once the function has been calculated, this requires a small amount of fine-tuning. You can then determine the threshold of money, looks, or status necessary to suddenly become attractive. And I will tell you more. Once you have identified the required function in this case, one could even envision an app that continuously adjusts the coefficients based on user feedback. Keeping them updated in real time, you will be able to diversify your portfolio with Redpill ETFs. The idea is very simple. Invest your time in as many social contexts as possible, and once the natural variability of the market shifts the coefficients in a way that is advantageous to you, seize the moment and obtain your long-desired copulation. So, as I have demonstrated, attraction is relatively simple. The problem is, you just suck. One of the things I hate most about modern society is the idea that all that matters is marketing and effective communication. Every area of our lives is bombarded with promotional messages and meta-messages that do nothing but explain to you how, in order to succeed, you must have effective communication. You must know the rules of the game, and you must know how to say the right thing at the right moment. This betrayal of genuineness permeates every corner of our society and is, at its core, a fundamentally deterministic way of thinking. Once the rules of the game are known, the outcome is not only guaranteed, but also justified. And so the degradation of social and political communication is accepted because it works, because it generates engagement and is effective. The damage caused by the impoverishment of the signifier will be an extremely difficult wave to manage. Redpill theory is nothing more than an extension of this deterministic way of thinking. The reflection of a world that believes interpersonal relationships to be nothing more than mechanisms that can be manipulated at will. The real difference between the market and interpersonal relationships is that the latter, rather than being an exchange, are a form of sharing. We resonate with others, and I believe attraction lies in the folds of this resonance. Human relationships are not calculable, and if they were, we would not be free.